We've now reached our regular Friday feature Movie Spotlight, where we review some of the latest releases at the Korean box office and online. With me in the studio this week are our film critics Jason Bechervaise and Darcy Paquet. Gentlemen, it's great to see you as always.
Yeah, great to be back.
Great to be back. Hello, Django.
Yes, hello, Jason. So we have one Hollywood and one local release to look at this week. First up, it is the big blockbuster of the week. It is the new Batman film, simply called The Batman. It stars Robert Pattinson in his first outing as the Cape Crusader, and it hit theatres in Korea on Tuesday to coincide with the March 1st Independence Movement Day holiday. Now, Jason, before we delve into this film, let's talk a little bit about the history of this franchise, because there have been a lot of versions and iterations of this iconic character, to say the least.
Yeah, around 2000 or so. The first screen adaptation was in 1943 as a 15-chapter serial. Now, this came 4 years after the character's debut in Detective Comics by artist Bob Kane and the writer Bob Finger. So there have been 24 or so films since then. I think a lot of our listeners will be familiar with Tim Burton's films, Batman in 1989 and Batman Returns in 1992. Batman, the first one in particular, was hugely significant in American culture. And it was also kind of part of, I guess, the first wave of superhero films coming a decade or so after the first Superman film. And then we have Christopher Nolan's acclaimed and hugely successful Dark Knight trilogy. Much of those films were shot on location and just very warmly embraced by critics and audiences alike. And in between those, of course, you've got the Joel Schumacher films starring Val Kilmer, and then later George Clooney in rather forgettable roles as Batman in Batman Forever in 95 and Batman and Robin in 1997. Huge cast, right?
Sure.
But Arnold Schwarzenegger and of course, George Clooney. And then there's also Ben Affleck in Zack Snyder's Batman versus Superman in 2016 and Justice League in 2017. Affleck was actually, he was initially to star in this new film called The Batman and also to direct at one point. But due to some personal issues and problems with the Justice League, he pulled out, probably for the best.
Why do you say that? Is it because you didn't like him as Batman, or did you have doubts of him directing a Batman film?
I think he's a decent director, but I was not hugely fond of Snyder's films. And Ben Affleck is a good actor. He's been in some terrific films, also a very good screenwriter. But him as Batman, for me, is not, it doesn't reflect the best of his work, put it that way.
Okay. So now that we've been brought up to speed on the Batman franchise history, Darcy, can you tell us a bit about this new film then? It's quite dark from what I gather.
Yeah, it is very dark, and it's more noir than action. It's a long film. It's 3 hours long, and it's not a film that kind of hurtles ahead at great speed. It takes its time and establishes an atmosphere. There's very little sunlight in this film. It's very almost all set at night. And a lot of people have been comparing it to David Fincher's Seven, because it has that kind of mood, and there is, the Riddler is the central antagonist in this film, but he is taking down different victims and leaving clues, and in a way that's kind of reminds many people of the movie Seven. So that's basically the mood of it. It has Robert Pattinson, who's one of my favorite actors, in the lead role. And it does have a fairly big cast. There's Zoë Kravitz, who was great in Soderbergh's Kimi. She's kind of an up-and-coming actress. There's Paul Dano as the Riddler. Jeffrey Wright, Peter Sarsgaard, Andy Serkis playing the butler.
He's great.
He is really good in that. And Colin Farrell, who you won't recognize unless you've heard in advance that that's who it is, because he has a lot of kind of makeup, and he's the penguin character.
Sure, that's quite a cast.
It is, and so it's very ambitious, very much kind of one of the big releases of this spring season. I mean, the story is pretty familiar. It dispenses with a lot of the setup because by this point we've seen this so many times. We know who Bruce
We all
Wayne
know the
is.
origins of Batman, basically, at this point.
Yeah, and so at this point he jumps in a little bit in the middle. Like he's already been kind of 2 years into his vigilante activities. But because there is this series of murders and because there's an upcoming election in Gotham, a lot of things seem to be coming to a head. So that's where we kind of pick up the action.
Okay, so Jason, what did you make of the film? Is it an improvement on some of the more recent Batman or Batman-related films? And 3 hours long, that is quite a length to slog through, really.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like 3 hours, though. I quite liked it. It's not up there with Christopher Nolan's films, but let's be honest, The Dark Knight it's one of the best. It is the best superhero film, and arguably one of the best kind of temples of the 2000s. But it is an improvement on some of the more recent films. Stylistically, I really like this film. It's really dark and edgy, and it's like there's this like really cool car chase that happens in the first half of the film, and you don't have these like grand kind of shots. Instead, what you have is you have the camera kind of placed on the vehicle or inside the vehicle. It's very kind of noirish, as Darcy mentioned. There's a lot of scenes that take place indoors as opposed to outdoors. Of course, you do have the Gotham City, and it's been shot on location in Chicago. Like the Dark Knight films, but it's different. It's pretty much all at night. It's raining. It's gritty. It's dark, and we don't learn all that much about Batman. But it's already been set up at that point. So obviously, you've got the connection between him and his family, and that comes into the narrative itself. And so. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a thriller for the first half of the film, and I love procedural thrillers, so I was really engaged throughout. And in the second half of the film, it kind of deviates somewhat, but I think it's smart, it's pacey, and stylistically really, really interesting.
Okay, so you liked it, but not as much as the Nolan films.
Yeah, but I've come to accept that they pretty much are unbeatable.
Darcy, what did you think of the film? It is dark, as we've all been pointing out, but do you think it was successful in the end? Do you think we'll see more Robert Pattinson Batman films to come?
I do think we'll see more, and I will look forward to them. I do like him in this role, and I like him in a lot of his roles, but for me too, despite the length, despite the fact that this is a franchise that's already been beaten to death, and in a way, I mean, Christopher Nolan, it's great that he made this, tremendous series of films, but in a way he killed the franchise because like where do you go after that? And this is about as good as you can do, I think, given the situation where everybody knows Batman. It's it's this mythic story that we retell over and over and over again. But the film, I guess one of the reasons I like it is because I'm a fan of kind of old Hollywood noir movies as well, and so it is very much on mood. There's a lot of suggestion in the film. I mean, even the action sequences don't really show you the action in a very direct kind of way. Like, there's a lot of things that you kind of catch out of the corner of your eye, and because the screen is so dark, there's a lot that you don't see in fine detail. But they are successful, I think, in creating a mood. It has been really interesting to read critical reviews because it's all over the map, and a lot of critics are saying like, this film has no reason to exist, and that it's ultimately kind of shackled by being a part of this franchise where you can't really do anything groundbreaking. But I think if you accept the fact that it is a superhero film, it is a franchise film, within those boundaries, I found it quite entertaining, and despite being 3 hours, I enjoyed it the whole way through.
Yeah, I also like the relationship as well between Batman. We don't see much in terms of Bruce Wayne. I mean, Pattinson's it's pretty much Batman throughout the whole film. And his relationship with James Gordon, they're kind of like this pairing to try and track down the Riddler. I think that works really, really well. And he's played by Jeffrey Wright, many are recognised from the Bond films. Sure. And so, some differences which I think work quite well.
Okay, so that was The Batman. Moving on to our Korean release this week. It is a film by Jang Cheol-soo, called Serve the People, or 인민을 위해 복무하라 in Korean. It is, in fact, a local adaptation of a 2005 Chinese novel of the same name by Yan Lianke. The book is set during the Cultural Revolution at the peak of Chairman Mao's rule. But Jason, I understand this film, the location of this film, has been moved from China to a country that shares, perhaps we should say, a striking resemblance to North Korea, right?
That's right. I mean, it's set in the 1970s in what many viewers will assume is North Korea. The military uniforms are pretty much the same. Korean is spoken, albeit without the strong North Korean dialect, or at least that's how I heard it. And then there's also a picture of a leader on the wall, but it's not Kim Il-sung. The film appears to follow the novel's premise quite closely. I confess I have not read the book myself. Have you, Darcy?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So the main character is Moo-gwang, played by Yeon Woo-jin. He's a soldier or conscript, and he's tasked with being a cook for a wife, for the wife of a military commander. The woman, played by Jian, seduces the conscript, issuing him commands both in and out of the bedroom, and they soon begin a passionate affair in what is also seen, I think, as a rejection against the state, which I think is quite unusual for a film dealing with North Korea, although here it's not North Korea, but it's a country that looks very much like North Korea. It does it quite superficially, but I still think it's quite interesting in exploring that. It also stars Jo Sung-ah as the military officer. The film was directed by Jang Cheol-soo, who's worked under Kim Ki-duk in his early career, and I think there are some similarities to Kim's films. Before he was working under Kim Ki-duk before he made his impressive debut Bedeviled in 2010, which is a fantastic film. In 2013 he made the North Korean spy comedy Secretly Greatly, which I distinctly remember for breaking box office records in its first few days.
Right.
But he's since found it difficult to kind of work in the commercial sector, it seems.
Okay, so the film is about an illicit love affair in what is essentially North Korea. Darcy, what did you make of this film, and what do you think of the setting? Does it bring anything to this story?
Yeah, I went to the press screening of this film a couple of weeks ago, and the director did say that this was very much intentional, that he decided not to use the North Korean accents and to make it kind of a abstract...
A quasi-North Korea.
Yeah, so it's a socialist country. It's set in the 1970s, but he didn't want to specifically kind of target North Korea in that sense. And certainly the book itself, is set in China, but it was hugely controversial in China. And the book is banned, I believe. So, in a way, the film, it's trying to do both things at once, in the sense that, because it doesn't come out and state that it's North Korea, then we can't really interpret the film as a political statement about the North. But it's close enough that you can't help but make the comparison. And so you're sort of on the line in that way. The criticism of the state is also very abstract in that sense. Ultimately, it is more of a personal story than it is a political story. And also, we live in a world. Does it work? It's been very poorly received, I must say, that by many critics. And part of me wants to defend the film because I think that I like the concept. And I do think that, this is... The atmosphere these days is not really supportive of this kind of a film. Both the fact that it is a very explicit film in terms of its sexual content.
Right.
That's becoming more and more rare in the Korean film industry. And it makes it an easy target, I think, in some ways. But yeah, I think the film could have been better. I do feel a bit that there was something that wasn't achieved that perhaps could have been achieved. But at the same time, when I see some people really light into the film online, then I do kind of feel this urge to kind of step up and defend it a little bit.
Okay, you seem quite protective of it. Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I went in fearing the worst because it is also a very long film, and I read some of the kind of comments online. Yeah, it's not great, but I certainly didn't hate it or loathe it. It's interesting. I mean, I've done quite a lot of research in terms of films dealing with North Korea. And yes, this is not North Korea, but this country looks very much like it. And so I like the idea of trying to kind of rebel against the state. Yes, it's very overt. And I think in that sense, it is becoming a lot less common nowadays for that kind of to see that kind of content, especially in cinemas. And because compared to the 80s and 90s. But that being, and so as a result, I think this is kind of almost also kind of primarily aimed at a VOD audience as well, and it might do quite well there as opposed to in cinemas. I do feel though for Jang Cheol-soo, he made this incredible feature debut, and then although Secretly Greatly was not a very good film, it did do very well commercially, and yet since then he's really struggled. So I do feel for him.
Okay, so that was Serve the People, which is out now in Korean theatres. We'll leave it there. Jason and Darcy, thank you for your reviews as always, and we will see you again next time.
Take care.
Yep, have a great weekend.